The United States government has confirmed it will not send any senior representatives to the upcoming United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP30, scheduled to begin on November 10th in Belém do Pará, Brazil. A White House official speaking on condition of anonymity stated that President Donald Trump remains focused on advancing his domestic energy agenda, prioritizing fossil fuel development over multilateral climate negotiations. The decision underscores a clear shift in US engagement with global climate diplomacy. Despite formal invitations to the Leaders' Summit on November 6th and 7th, President Trump will not attend in person. The White House has also confirmed that no cabinet-level delegation will represent Washington at the event. The official explained that the president is directly engaging with leaders around the world on energy issues, emphasizing his commitment to expanding global trade and energy partnerships. According to the source, these efforts align with what the administration describes as historic trade and peace agreements, centered on energy security and alliance building. Since taking office for his new term in January, President Trump has withdrawn the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement for the second time. The move reaffirms his administration's broader policy of promoting oil, gas and coal production while scaling back climate-related international commitments. Trump's broader energy policy, President Trump, has consistently framed his energy policy around what he calls energy dominance, a concept that seeks to increase fossil fuel production and export while reducing regulatory barriers for the industry. His administration has repeatedly argued that the US economy depends on affordable and abundant domestic energy sources. Environmental advocates, however, have warned that this approach could significantly weaken global climate action. Several international observers note that Washington's absence from COP30 may further erode confidence in global climate cooperation. While US officials continue bilateral talks with energy-producing nations, the administration's stance has diverged sharply from those of the European Union, Canada, and other major economies committed to carbon neutrality targets. President Trump has also issued threats of economic retaliation against countries adopting carbon pricing mechanisms, including those proposed by the International Maritime Organization under the United Nations framework. The White House argues that such measures unfairly burden US industries. Concerns over treaty withdrawal. Climate experts and activists have expressed concern that Washington could go beyond its exit from the Paris Agreement and attempt to withdraw from the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change itself, the foundational treaty signed in 1992 that underpins global climate cooperation. However, legal analysts remain uncertain whether the executive branch has the authority to terminate a Senate-ratified treaty without congressional approval. This ambiguity has fueled political and legal debate in Washington about the long-term trajectory of US climate engagement. International Reactions Brazil, the host of COP30, has confirmed that fewer than 60 world leaders have registered to attend the leaders segment of the summit. Those confirmed include the presidents or prime ministers of France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Norway, Colombia, Chile, Cape Verde, and Liberia. Analysts in Brasilia suggest that the lower-than-expected attendance reflects growing geopolitical divisions over climate finance, carbon border taxes, and the pace of energy transition in developing economies. For Brazil, hosting COP30 in the Amazonian city of Belém symbolizes its commitment to environmental protection and sustainable development. The Brazilian government aims to highlight the importance of rainforest preservation while promoting investment in clean energy and climate adaptation. Timeline: Trump's energy diplomacy and statements. Earlier footage aboard Air Force One from October 30th, 2025 shows President Trump reflecting on a recent international meeting where he spoke in typically assertive terms about energy and trade partnerships. Thank you all. It was a great success. It was a great honor. I mean, he's a tremendous leader of a very powerful country, and I give great respect to him. And we appreciate the fact that he came for this meeting, said Donald Trump, President of the United States. In a follow-up statement during the same exchange, the president confirmed upcoming diplomatic visits aimed at strengthening trade relations with Beijing. Yeah, that's another thing we agreed. I'll be going to China in April, and he'll be coming here sometime after that, whether it's in Florida, Palm Beach, or Washington. DC Trump also made specific reference to progress on global resource trade. All of the rare earth has been settled. And that's for the world. I mean, you know, worldwide, I guess you could really say this was a worldwide situation, not just a US situation. So we continue to produce the rare earths and buy the rare earths and everything else, you know, when you see it from other countries. But China is That whole situation, that roadblock is gone now. There's no roadblock at all on rare earth. That will hopefully disappear from our vocabulary for a little while. These remarks, though unrelated to COP30 directly, reveal the administration's consistent focus on mineral supply chains and industrial competitiveness, priorities that have overshadowed environmental diplomacy. Domestic climate tensions. Meanwhile, environmental demonstrations continue across the United States. In April 2024, climate activists gathered in Washington, D.C., unfurling large banners designed to resemble wind turbines near the Washington Monument. They chanted slogans such as, "What do we want? Climate justice. When do we want it? Now." And decarbonize, decolonize. The protests reflected growing frustration among environmental groups over federal inaction and the rollback of emissions targets. Activists argue that the US withdrawal from key climate frameworks undermines global progress at a time when climate-related disasters, from wildfires to floods, have intensified worldwide. Despite the demonstrations, the Trump administration has maintained its stance that national economic growth and energy independence must take precedence over multilateral climate obligations. Officials point to rising domestic employment in oil and gas sectors as evidence that their policy is working. Host nation, Brazil's climate focus. Belém, the capital of Pará state, is preparing to host thousands of delegates, environmental groups and journalists for COP30. Aerial footage of the city captures the contrast between its modern waterfront developments, such as Porto Futuro 2 and Estação das Docas, and nearby informal settlements like Vila da Barca, built on stilts along the riverbanks. The choice of Belém, situated at the gateway to the Amazon rainforest, carries symbolic weight. The conference aims to place indigenous rights, deforestation, and Amazon preservation at the center of global climate discussions. Brazilian officials say they hope to secure new international financing commitments for forest conservation and sustainable energy projects. However, the absence of major economies such as the United States may complicate negotiations over long-term funding and emission reduction mechanisms. Global Context COP30 takes place amid a complex geopolitical climate. Energy security concerns remain high, driven by global supply disruptions and rising fuel prices. The competing priorities of economic recovery, energy independence, and environmental responsibility have created deep divisions among both developed and developing nations. European leaders attending the summit are expected to press for greater accountability on emission targets, while emerging economies continue to call for increased financial support and fairer terms for the transition away from fossil fuels. Observers also note that China's growing influence in renewable energy and resource supply chains has reshaped international climate negotiations. Beijing's leadership in solar panel manufacturing and rare earth processing has given it strategic leverage in green technology markets, an area where Washington has sought to regain competitiveness through domestic investment rather than global collaboration. The US role in the global climate framework. Since the original signing of the Paris Agreement in 2015, the United States has alternated between engagement and withdrawal, depending on administration changes. Under President Trump, the US first exited the accord in 2020, rejoined under President Joe Biden in 2021, and then withdrew again in early 2025 after Trump's return to office. Critics argue that this repeated policy reversal undermines international trust in Washington's commitments. Several foreign diplomats attending preparatory meetings for COP30 expressed frustration that the world's second largest emitter of greenhouse gases will not have senior representation at the summit. Despite the withdrawal, US states such as California and New York continue to implement independent climate action plans, adhering to stricter emission standards than federal policy requires. This dynamic highlights a growing divide between national and subnational climate initiatives within the United States. With fewer than 60 heads of state confirmed to attend, COP30 faces an uphill battle in restoring confidence in global cooperation. Analysts expect the absence of the United States to shift focus toward regional alliances, particularly between the European Union, Latin American countries, and smaller island states, most affected by climate change. For Washington, the decision marks another step away from collective environmental diplomacy and toward bilateral economic deals centered on fossil fuels, mining, and industrial supply chains. The Trump administration maintains that these efforts will strengthen American competitiveness and reduce dependency on foreign energy imports. However, environmental advocates warn that the long-term cost in lost climate leadership and environmental credibility may be substantial. The United States' decision not to send high-ranking officials to COP30 confirms a decisive turn in its climate diplomacy. As world leaders prepare to meet in Belém, the absence of the world's largest economy leaves a visible gap in the global effort to address climate change.